Today we're going to be going over the first major update in Diablo 4. Now there are a lot of things in this patch. The short version of this update is they've buffed a ton of stuff that people simply do not use for most of the commonly used builds. There are several issues that have been fixed. We have players couldn't engage with Dead Man Dread dungeon boss. Certain whispers couldn't be completed, so they fixed an issue with that. They fixed an issue with those who call the storm event couldn't register as completed. Fixed an issue where those who call the storm event would place a permanent debuff on the player that would gradually drain health. Now, I'm not going to go over all of these fixed issues. It will be up on the screen for a few seconds, so you can pause it. But as you can see here, we do have a ton of fixes with certain instances where players would be blocked out of completing a mission. Here we have a bunch more fixes, which I'll leave on screen for a few seconds. And while this is on screen, I do want to talk about some of the more important changes in the update. One being increased XP in Nightmare Dungeons. Now, already personally tested this, and I'm not sure exactly how much it was increased, but I am noticing my bar move up faster. Like, on my level 99 rogue, I was just testing it, and, definitely noticing larger XP gain in the Nightmare Dungeons. Another huge thing about Nightmare Dungeons, now this is just a convenience factor, but in my opinion, it's pretty damn needed. Now you can simply highlight the Nightmare Dungeon and travel right to it. You don't have to wait for another player to go there. You don't have to go there yourself. Simply activate your signal and you can go there. Also, on the map, while you hover over it, it tells you the boons and all the negative and positive for that dungeon. Did not do that before, so that is nice. They also fixed a very common issue with player health. You've probably noticed your teammates looking like they're dead when they're not. So that is fixed. So that's a really nice change as well. And I think I've left this on screen long enough. We will move on. Here we have a bunch more fixes. Most likely you didn't experience any of these. These are just issues that a couple players, few players did encounter. They are issues that you could encounter and now are fixed. While this is up on the screen, I want to talk about something else that I feel is beneficial in the patch for most players. So, Helltide bosses now drop more resources and just give you more XP. So that is actually really sweet, especially for players that are grinding the game and the more hardcore players on the game. You need those resources for your end game roles. So getting more resources from those bosses and more XP in the Helltides is really sweet. So I do like that. If they want to nerf all the XP farms, fine. You gotta give us some way to actually get the XP though. So buffing it in Nightmare Dungeons and rewards in an area that we gotta farm anyway to get our rerolls. I like that. Personally, I don't really think you had to nerf the XP farms besides the one under the event. That was completely broken. They didn't have to nerf champions or the other one, but whatever. At least you're actually keeping your word with the endgame content, actually putting the XP there. So I can get behind and I can respect that. Here we have a ton of more issues that were fixed in the game. Honestly, I had no idea that there was this many issues being reported in the game. Personally, I did not experience 99% of these, but apparently some players did have these occur for them. So all these issues here are being fixed as well. And very shortly, we will get past all these fixes and into the changes made to the characters, which I know a lot of you are more concerned with versus these issues that you probably didn't personally experience. So we'll leave this up for another couple seconds. You can go back and pause that, and we'll move on. Here we have some miscellaneous fixes. You can read those. I'm going to be talking about the experience rewards, which I feel more players care about. We have significantly increased the experience awarded for completing Nightmare Dungeons. Talked about that. Significantly increased the experience gained from killing monsters in Nightmare Dungeons. Talked about that. Helltide chests now provide substantially more bonus experience when opened. Talked about that. Significantly increased reward experience for completing individual whispers across the board. Did not talk about that. Another end game content that you have to go through when you're grinding. That is what I'm talking about. You want to nerf the XP farms? Fine. You gotta put the XP gain in the end game content. And you know what? They did that. So, at least they are giving the XP where it should be. So, I can kind of get behind now their nerfs. I was definitely not a fan of them before, but you know what? At least they're putting the XP gain where it should have been. Where they said from the start that's where they wanted the XP. That's where your end game gameplay should be. So now you're getting more experience for what you would do grinding end game content. And one other huge XP gain fixed an issue where no experience was rewarding for completing the holdout style that can occur after finishing dungeon objectives. Let's all face it, if you did level 40, 50, 60 plus dungeons, those holdouts were a fucking nightmare. There's fucking 10 elites fucking coming at you as soon as you enter it, and you got no XP, no drops, absolutely jack shit, nothing. And at least now we are finally getting the XP for one of the biggest XP sections in the dungeon. So that is really nice. Really like that we're finally seeing XP for those holdouts. I already talked about teleporting to Nightmare Dungeon, so I'm skip over that. But it is worth noting, Helltide rolling bosses will now more consistently drop higher quality loot. This is kind of huge. The loot that they were dropping was good, but it's an end game farm. And those are the hardest enemies in that farm. They should be dropping basically as high quality, highest RNG drop rates basically in the game, besides like an Uber Lilith or something crazy that they add in. So them upping that drop rate to basically max, if not max, I get behind that. Like, I feel that's the drop rate those roaming bosses deserve. Now on to the character changes. For the most part, 90% of these changes are buffs. 90% of them are also the moves that nobody is using. If it's a move that somebody's using and it was buffed very insignificantly. But we're going to leave these up for a couple seconds and then scroll to the next section. So if you want, you can pause, go back 5 seconds for your character, and you can see exactly what was changed for your character. Here we have some more changes for the barb. If you want to go back and see the earlier changes, just click back, pause. Now all these changes for the most part are not used moves. Like Iron Skin Barrier is used. We have the Call of the Ancients bonus attack speed was increased. But for the most part, most of the changes on the characters are moves that nobody are using and probably won't be using, but basically everything is a buff. Here are some bonuses for the Barbarian. These are base level flat value increases for legendary aspects. Moving on to the druid, and I'll leave this up for a few seconds as well, and then we'll scroll to the next section for the druid. Like all the other characters for this update, most of the buffs are for the moves that are just not being utilized by anyone. A couple of them did get buffs, like Incinerate for the sorcerer, which we'll get to in a moment. The Nature Storm passive got a 10% buff, even though that is also a very uncommonly used one for the druid. But for the most part, basically it's all buffs for ones you don't use already that aren't in any commonly used build, and very minor buffs for ones that are being utilized at all in any build. Moving on, we have some more changes for the druid. I'll leave this up for a few seconds. Here we have some more skill changes and legendary aspect changes. Moving on to the Necromancer, and to answer everybody's question before you start reading, no. Very surprisingly, the minions did not get a buff. Kinda shocked at that. I thought if anything would be changed with the Necromancer, it would have been the minions. But no. Minions are not included in this update. Here we have some more changes to the Necro. Personally, I would like to see Bone Prison removed from the game completely for getting in too many players' ways and trapping them in rings and getting them killed. Also, they did now make minions always engage targets when you cast a curse. So your minions will target cursed enemies. As I was stating before, they didn't buff the minions at all, but it is nice that they now engage targets that you curse. Lastly, we have a couple of changes for the legendary aspects. Won't be leaving this one up as long. Bursting Bone flat damage increased from 0.22 to 0.3 to 0.45 to 0.6. Flesh rendering essence gained increased from 10 to 20 to 20 to 40. And Fast Blood ultimate cooldown reduced increased from 5 to 1 to 1 to 1.5 seconds. Moving on to the Rogue. Here we have some skill adjustments for the Rogue. And here we have the remaining adjustments made to the Rogue. And lastly, we have adjustments made to the Sorcerer. So here is the first set of skill adjustments made to the Sorcerer. Here we have more skill adjustments and the start of the legendary aspects. And lastly, here are all the legendary aspect changes made to the Sorcerer. And that is everything you need to know for this first major update for Diablo 4. If you liked the video, leave a like, comment, share. It helps others find the video. I hope this helped.